Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the hybrid field demonstration organized by the University of Florence and the Land and Water Division of FAO in the framework of the Building Forward Better initiative for the module of water harvesting and agroforestry. Today we will have different sessions, both from here, the School of Agriculture of the University of Florence, and from the farm La Scoscesa, which is in the Chianti region of Tuscany, which is quite an arid agroecological system where agroforestry and water harvesting are implemented. We hope you enjoy. And it's my pleasure to give the floor to Stefania Giusti for a introduction. Please, I'm sorry to all participants, mute your microphone. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Giulio. And good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's hybrid field demonstration on water harvesting and agroforestry. As part of the training activities conducted in the framework of the FAO Building Forward Better initiative. The event of this morning is organized in collaboration with the University of Florence and its water harvesting lab, with the aim to present you relevant practices of water management for land restoration in a semi-arid area in central Italy. Building on the knowledge transferred on these topics during the previous phases of the project, we believe the case study we are presenting today will enhance the understanding on the importance of effective water management practices to contribute to food security, particularly in water-scarce areas, which are significantly affected by the impacts of climate change. They need to improve the ways in which we manage water resources and employ them for irrigation is crucial. Sharing experiences of effective water harvesting practices, we believe, is fundamental to complement local knowledge with innovative approaches based on local conditions. In over 2 years, this has been the approach adopted by the Building Forward Better initiative, presenting FAO and global innovative approaches and tools will guide us during the next 1.5 hours to illustrate the site selected and discuss with you the benefits and the potential of presented solutions. I invite you to intervene and write your comments and/or questions in the chat box so we can all profit from the exchange amongst different experiences. As always, we hope you will enjoy the lesson and we look forward to your feedback. With this, I leave the floor to Professor Bresci and wish you a fruitful discussion.
Thank you very much. And it's really my pleasure to collaborate with the FAO in this very important initiative. And I will just introduce the concept of water harvesting, saying that we have a laboratory established in 2017 working on water harvesting, and in particular with the use of GIS and other and participatory approach. We had some projects running in many countries, and we found out how really water harvesting can represent a way for coping with climate change in arid and semi-arid areas. So definition is the process of concentrating precipitation through runoff and storing it for beneficial uses. So this is the concept of water management, water resources management. The countries of experience where we worked with water harvesting, as you can see, are Italy, but not only. So Nepal, Ethiopia, Mozambique, Niger, Burundi, Angola, Tunisia, Egypt, Bolivia, and Guatemala. And we have been involved, and we are still involved in some EU projects like EuropeAid and the Prima Foundation, and some projects financed by the Italian Agency for Cooperation and Development, and some consultancies. So our research lines are, as we said, related with water harvesting, and in particular with we focus on the importance of involving the people that are going to use water harvesting techniques, so water participatory approach. We investigated the effects of water harvesting establishment on ecosystem services and also microclimate changes. We worked on fog collection as a water resource, then flood-based farming system. We focused on wide hydrology and natural-based solution. I'll stop here, and I will give the floor to Maher Salman. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Elena. Good morning to everyone. It's also my pleasure to be with you in person here in Florence, and also virtually with colleagues. So my name is Maher Salman. I'm a senior land and water officer and a team lead of agricultural water management. at the land and water division. At the FAO. As we all know, agri-food systems are subject to increasing water under multiple use and multiple pressure. Providing sufficient and quality food is a clear commitment for the entire global community, reflected across a number of SDGs. It is estimated that responding to food demand will entail an increase of around 53% of water consumption by 2050. The sustainable and effective management of land and water resources for food production is thus of vital importance to reach these objectives. Agriculture, as we all know, represents the main consumer of water resources. This consumption ranges from 60 to 90% globally. The degradation of global water supplies in both quality and quantity terms is a severe constraint to rural and overall national development, particularly for emerging and undeveloped economies. Adapting to the changing climate is needed in order to reduce the most negative impacts of water resources and guarantee food security to the next generations. Rainwater harvesting for irrigation is indeed a valid practice adopted since ancient times to effectively manage, control, and use water resources from rainfall and runoff for in situ or future storage use. In arid and semi-arid regions, rainwater harvesting is commonly implemented for supplementary irrigation and to compensate rainfall during periods of water scarcity or stress. In addition, traditional knowledge has been applied for centuries to catch and store rainfall and runoff and to contribute to the restoration of degraded lands and agropastoral systems, as well as to the sustainability of agri-food systems. Innovative practices and technologies nowadays can accompany and improve the benefits of ancient approaches to adapt solutions to field conditions and help unlocking the potential of water resources for irrigation and agriculture. Across countries and regions, FAO has been promoting and applying different water harvesting systems to improve food security, combining local knowledge with modern techniques to increase the benefits and ensure the sustainability of agri-food systems. I give some examples. In Jordan, a project based on a three-dimension approach was implemented to reduce the vulnerability of Jordan rural communities and support agricultural production through a water energy nexus. In Jordan, in the same project, the conjunctive use of groundwater with captured water or surface water ensured a reliable supply of resources, reducing the risk of groundwater overexploitation at the same time. And it also deployed solar powered irrigation provided as a sustainable source of energy for water lifting. Another example in Africa and Uganda, where a pilot site was designed and implemented using solar energy or having solar energy solutions to pump water from a tank to small-scale localized irrigation of high-value crops. Since 2018, farmers in that specific village have also benefited from the enhanced yields of banana and coffee crops. This hybrid field demonstration is going to showcase how practices are applied in Italy, a country increasingly experiences also condition of water scarcity, not only in the summer period, but extends to even a longer period now. The case selected is a valuable example of the multiple benefits of context-tailored practices of water collection for irrigation, as well as for land restoration and groundwater recharge. I hope the virtual visit will raise some curiosity and inspire you with relevant cases of water management to be applied in your countries for strengthening crop production and improved food security. Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Salman. And it's time to start properly with the hybrid demonstration activity. For starting, we will give the floor to Lorenzo Costa. Lorenzo Costa is connected from the farm that we will show later on, and is an expert permaculturist with a background in agricultural science. Since I believe some years, he got this marginal land in the Chianti region, which is, by the way, a very important winemaking region for our country, and start rehabilitating the landscape with a lot of agroforestry and water harvesting. His tenure, his land is a specific and very interesting example of integration of water harvesting, agroforestry, and different agronomic technologies. So we will give now a short desk presentation from his field, and then later on we will go on with more technical activities. Thank you, Lorenzo, and the floor is to you.
Thank you. Good morning to all. I'll share my laptop. Okay. Okay, hope you see the slides. Yes. Okay, good morning to all. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I thank the University of Florence, the FAO, and I will start to briefly explain what La Scoscesa is. The farm is designed applying permaculture. Permaculture is a conscious design system that aims to design systems that are stable, sustainable, efficient, and resilient. Permaculture is the crisis of two words, permanent and culture. It was originated as a system of design in 1978 by Bill Mollison and David Holmgren in Australia. And but it is actually an ethical design system that gains a lot of its solutions from indigenous and traditional knowledge. And so it was perfect to design the farm applying permaculture. The farm is 9 hectares in extension. We have 5 kilometers of dry stone retaining walls of terraces. And so half of the land is terrace, the other half is woodland, forest, typical woodland and forest of Chianti, based on oak trees. And we have 130 meters of difference in elevation from the top to bottom of the farm. So that's why it's called the La Scoscesa, which means steep. And we use permaculture as a framework for the design of the farm, applying a systemic way of thinking and designing the farm. Our farm design specifically is based on agroecology. And for soil fertility, we are applying KNF, which is Korean natural farming. Korean natural farming was started 60 years ago by Master Cho. He's an agronomist from South Korea. And it works looking at the at lowering the costs for the farmer, because all the fertilizers are produced on farm, applied using resources we find on farm, and with a lot of different recipes, we can enhance the health of plants, and we can regenerate soil working with local microorganisms. Our focus areas on farm are soil fertility regeneration, rainwater harvesting, the transition towards a perennial agriculture, and landscape design. Soil fertility regeneration is something that we focus on because it is very important for plant health and for the health of the soil, the microorganisms, and all the symbiotic microorganisms, fungi that live in the soil that are symbiotic with the roots of the plants. Rainwater harvesting is directly interlinked to soil fertility regeneration. We believe that harvesting rainwater, lifting the water table, infiltrating water into the soil, can make the system more resilient, can make the plants, may them be annual or perennial, more resistant to long drought periods or to high temperatures. We focus on transitioning towards a perennial agriculture because we believe that we have to even think in this moment of emergency under a climatic perspective. We have to transition to look at different resources we can use for food consumption. One example we always make, because we produce it here on farm, is acorn flour from oak trees. Balano cultures, which is a name that is used for the cultures that are based on acorn flour, acorn consumption, are very old, very ancient. It is said that our species has eaten more acorns than wheat, really, than grains, because we started eating acorns thousands of years ago. And still today, there are cultures that eat acorns, consume acorns normally in Portugal, in California, in Korea, and even some examples in Italy, in Sardinia. We are looking at landscape design because today we have to look at the rehabilitation, retaking back old marginal land like ours. Today, with big machinery, this landscape wouldn't be used for agriculture. This land was abandoned for 40 years. And we are trying to demonstrate that we can grow food even in a context that today will be abandoned, and create a project that is sustainable economically and can help the local community to have access to nutrient and good food. We focus on rainwater harvesting. So we work around three concepts, that is to slow, spread, and sink water. And because it is central today to rehabilitate, to lift the water table. There are many examples around the world of water harvesting systems in Rajasthan in India, in Malawi, and projects that I've studied in these years because I was very interested and because we can learn a lot from arid countries. Even if we have more rain, we have to start to apply the techniques we see in arid countries, even in our climate, because we are always more under stress for what it means under looking at rain, at water we have underground for wells or for irrigation for agriculture. So we have 16 infiltration ponds on farm, and the total capacity of infiltration is 180,000 liters of water. And since April 2018, we have, not 1018, it was wrong in the slide, 2018, we have infiltrated 4.5 million liters of water on 2.5 hectares of land. And this will give us, in 5 to 8 years, we will start to see how the woodland has become more resilient and how it manages well the high temperatures we get in summer. And we are working with polycultures, which means working with different crops all together, plants mixed together that sustain each other. We are creating biodiversity between annual and perennial species to increase the farm resilience. And this is something we are very focused on because it is central today to create self-sufficient communities locally that can produce their food and that can answer to the problems that come with high temperatures, long drought periods in summer. I nearly finished. Just one last slide. The beauty of a terrace landscapes also embodies its fragility, because we look at landscapes that are terraced as beautiful examples, but terrace landscapes can survive only if they are still an active part of the structure of a productive rural community. And in Italy, in many parts of Italy, terrace landscapes are abandoned because, as I said, they are not seen as landscapes that are useful in today's agro-industrial systems with big machinery, but they can still answer to the needs of communities and to the fact of functioning in an active part in life and economy and, let's say, relationships and the social perspective of local communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lorenzo. Very clear presentation. I remind all the participants to please mute the microphone, because sometimes it's very complex if you speak from your microphones. And I'm going now to give a technical presentation about terraces, and I will therefore introduce the topic that we will see after these slides. So now I will give a short presentation, just 10 minutes, and then we will see the first session from the field, which is actually a very nice video just from the farm of Lorenzo. I remind again for all the attendees online, because we have some attendees also here in Florence, to write down the question on the chat. Then we will analyze this question with Lorenzo and the other speakers later. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going now to introduce one of the technical topics of today, that is the one of terracing for water harvesting in arid areas. So as Professor Bresci introduced, water harvesting can be defined as the process of concentrating precipitation through runoff and storing it for beneficial use. This is quite a technical definition that allows us to understand why we talk about water harvesting and which are the key elements. So you can see here that the key elements are precipitation, runoff, and storage. So basically, the main elements of a water harvesting system are the catchment, the runoff, the storage, and the cultivated area. It's very important to understand that the runoff is a very identifying element. This is what defines the rain-fed agriculture from water harvesting. If you have rainfall falling on land, that is rain-fed agriculture, in order to have proper water harvesting, you have to collect the runoff that is falling on a catchment and store this water, or even applying this water directly to a cultivated area. So this is the important definition. And all water harvesting structures, they are basically agronomic practices or civil engineer works that allow the collection of runoff. The classification of water harvesting, which is very useful to understand, it's based on the ratio between the catchment, which is also called collection area, and the cultivated area, which is called application area. So as you can imagine, you can have different techniques. Some with a very large catchment with respect to the cultivated area. These are more common in arid areas. And some where the catchment area and the cultivated area are more or less the same. In this sense, we can make this definition, which you can see is based on the catchment application area ratio. We can talk about flood water harvesting when the catchment is over 1,000 times bigger than the application area. We can talk about macro catchment water harvesting when the catchment is from 10 times to 100 times larger than the application area. And if you remember, for the ones that attended our previous seminar of sand dams, we were something in between floodwater and macro catchment water harvesting. And then we have micro catchment water harvesting. And we talk about micro catchment water harvesting when the area that you use for cultivation is more or less the same area that you use for collecting. And then, of course, we have rooftop water harvesting that you use sometimes for horticultural production, can be used for potable use, livestock, but it does not follow this rule because it's very linked to human settlements. But what about terraces? And how terraces are linked to water harvesting? Why terracing are water harvesting structure? A terrace is a piece of sloped plain that has been cut into a series of successfully receiving flat surfaces of platforms which resemble steps for the purpose of more effective farming. And actually, we can also keep a further perspective on cultivation, and we can define terrace cultivation as a method of growing crops on sides of hills or mountains by planting on graduated terraces built into the... I'm sorry again for all the participants. Please mute your microphone. Thank you. Cesare, I'm talking with the...
Yes. I sent a very lot of messages in for this problem in question. Thank you.
Yeah, can you mute all the microphone? Thank you. So terrace cultivation is labor intensive but is also employed effectively to maximize arable land area in variable terrains, and to reduce soil erosion and water loss. This element, water loss, is the most important. So as we can see from this other slide, in the framework of water harvesting, we can see terraces as a micro-catchment technique. So coming back to the concept of terrace cultivation has different objectives. The first one is to keep the terrain in the slope flat, so to facilitate cultivation in slopes. But given to the fact that you change the surface of the landscape, you change the shape of the landscape, you can also have additional benefit, and water harvesting is one of those. Therefore, in very arid and semi-arid areas, if you do this technique that is quite labor intensive, so it costs a lot in terms of money, in terms of labor, you might have additional benefits, not only the flat terrain. You know, I mean, in Tuscany, in the arid region of Tuscany, you do terraces for both the reasons, but in other countries like China, where you have terraces for rice cultivation, this is actually done only for having a flat terrain. But in most of the arid area, terracing is a very good investment for two reasons. You can see here, and it will be shown also in the live demonstration, that you should also drain these terraces, because of course you change the shape of the landscape and you do not want to have too much water. So some water should stay in the soil, but the excess water should also be drained. And this is true in most of semi-arid areas. In very arid areas, you can also maybe try without drainage system. This is a little bit the idea of how to build terraces. So you basically work with strips, and the horizontal or semi-horizontal strips of the terraces are depending on the slope. The construction can be manual by animal or even by tractors or bulldozer. And of course, you can, if you keep this surface without cultivation, you can store more runoff because you generate more runoff, but you can also enhance erosion. So the vegetation cover is something that should also be under control. A very important thing when you build bench terraces, I'm saying this because it's very common error in many implementation, you have to basically cut the landscape after having removed the topsoil. So what you do is basically you mark your landscape, you remove the topsoil, you make the excavation for the terrace, and then you replace the topsoil. You do not make excavation with the topsoil already in place, because if you make the excavation and you excavate the topsoil, then you lose all the fertility that you have in your land. So you have to do this operation, very important. And then finally, I will give some element for the classification of terraces. So you can have different types of terraces. I'm putting this here because this is a very nice FAO publication that I encourage all the students to check. It's really available on the internet. You can basically have terraces for flood, terraces for areas, which is counter slope. You have, terraces with discontinuities, but also terraces that have some ponds in between for fruit tree cultivation that are called orchard terraces. Finally, you can have transitional terraces, so mixing all these types. Why I'm saying this? Because I want just to mark one very important point before showing you the video, which is very, very interesting, is that terracing is a particular form of water harvesting. As we discussed before, is also a way of managing the landscape. So I mean, this is true in general for all water harvesting technologies, but specifically for terraces, you have a lot of culture, you have different way of doing terracing around the world. And as all we know, terraces represent also cultural heritage of some farming heritage traditions. So, I mean, we start now from the basis, you will see an application, but please keep in mind that terraces are very, very, very important for many farming systems around the world. Thank you. I'm now muting the whole microphone, and I'm asking the technical part of the meeting to show the first video that we have from La Scoscesa farm. Thank you.
We are in a typical terrace landscape in Chianti in Tuscany, and terrace landscapes are considered normal in hillside landscapes where you build terraces for two reasons. First reason is to gain soil space to grow food. So on a hillside, having the difference in elevation in the hillside, you build the terraces to gain space to grow food. So this is typical in Tuscany. 75% of the agriculture here was made on a hillside, hilly, let's say, in a hilly context. And terraces are typical and are specific of Tuscany. The second reason you build terraces is you have a lot of stone, obviously. Here we have a lot of bedrock that is very high on the surface, and it was broken to make stones to build the terraces. The terraces are primarily so to gain soil space to grow food, and secondly, they are a water harvesting system because terraces distribute water, rainwater specifically, on their length, and so the whole terrace gets the same amount of water. But this depends in reality on what you grow. So typically in Chianti, where we are now, terraces are not level on the hillside, so the water doesn't get distributed along the whole length of the terrace, but the water is sent towards the valley because here what was grown traditionally were olive trees, grapes, and wheat that don't need too much water. So traditionally they didn't want to have water that would stay in the soil. So they would build the terraces so that the water would go towards the valley. And this is a specific condition that we have here in Tuscany, we have here in Chianti. Usually when we see terrace landscapes, the terraces are made nearly level on the side of the hill so as to distribute the water. So this is a specific feature that we find in conditions that we have, which is a hillside, and they are, as I said, primarily to distribute water, to harvest the rainwater, infiltrate it in the soil, and terraces function as a system that gains space to grow food. Because on a hillside, you don't have a lot of space, so the best way is to build a terrace. And we find terraces in many different landscapes and territories and regions in the world, from South America to North America to Africa to Asia and in Europe. In Italy, there are many regions that have terraces, and they have all functioned historically. What the system here we are looking at has is the fact that this is a marginal, abandoned rural landscape, which today, with the typical conventional agriculture, agro-industrial systems, would not be used because we can't use big machinery. We have to use small machinery that is adapted to the small spaces we have on terraces. And even because with big machinery, the weight of the machinery would ruin the terraces. The walls risk to collapse. So it's interesting because if we apply agroforestry, agroecology as an agricultural system in this context, in this specific context, we can manage to apply systems of growing food that don't need big machinery, that can function with manual work, that can function with small machinery or hand tools. This is the easiest thing we can have on a terrace landscape. Terrace landscapes are interesting because they function as well as a system that functions as a thermal mass. So the wall behind me gains the heat of the sun, and this releases heat that can create microclimates, so food can grow in open field on a terrace until even maybe in autumn, and can still grow without any sort of structure that needs to protect the plants that are growing, if we're speaking about animals. On terraces, traditionally, we would have had trees on top of the wall, and between the wall where the trees are and the other wall, which is on the second terrace going up the hill, we would have had animal plants grown that would have been, in this case here, wheat, or we can grow vegetables as we do in this farm. So it is interesting to see how terraces can be highly adaptable and useful to be a system that functions in a multifunctional way for the farm. We are on a dry stone retaining wall on top of a terrace. Traditionally, dry stone retaining walls for terraces are built with the face of the wall that is on this side, and then we have small rocks like these ones that serve as a system that infiltrates the water and protects the wall we have on the outside of the terrace that is visible, because in this way, with all the small rocks, water infiltrates easily and it doesn't risk to damage the wall. In this case though, we have a dry stone wall which is called a double curtain wall, because we have the wall which is the face of the wall that we see on the terrace, and we have on this side another wall which is where the soil finishes and we're on top of the terrace. This is a traditional system that we find in this region, in this sub-region of Tuscany, and is related to two aspects. First of all, there was a lot of rocks, a lot of stone. So having to use all this stone and to clear up the field that comes when we build the terrace, the traditional building system was to build two walls and to fill up the middle of the two walls with all these small rocks that you see in front of me. And this is a specific condition we can find only in contexts where the stone is really, really a lot. So a dry stone retaining wall is not straight when it's built, but it sort of diverges from being straight about 15 to 20% towards the hill, towards the top of the terrace. This way the wall can sustain the weight of the soil that we have on the terrace and will manage to deal with the weight of the soil, and even when the soil is saturated with water, with rainwater that rains on top of the terrace. This is a typical condition we find, and traditionally this way of building walls is used everywhere in the world, because obviously builders were conscious of the fact that you needed to have a sort of percentage of divergence from having a straight wall, because the characteristic of these walls is that they're dry stone walls. There's no cement, there's nothing that holds the wall together, other from the fact that the stones are put one on top of each other to create a stable wall that will not fall down even if we walk on top of it. That's why we can stay sitting, we can stay on top of this wall now and speak, because it's completely stable. What you see here are dry stone walls that are at least 200 years old. Typically, it depends on the type of stone with which we build the wall, but typically a dry stone retaining wall can last from 200 to 250 years. In this case, the stone we have in this condition is a typical stone which is called galestro or alberese, and it has a problem actually when it's used to build dry stone retaining walls, because after a few years during winter and during summer, with the hot and the cold weather, the stone starts to sort of become like flour. It breaks into small pieces. So this means that there is major maintenance for the dry stone walls. And this is a characteristic of terrace landscapes. Terrace landscapes are interesting as a traditional system, but they need to be, let's say, used, built, and part of the landscape if they are part of a productive agricultural landscape. Because what we have is that the fact that the walls have to be maintained, so that the whole landscape has to be lived, has to be used, is part of the landscape that the community uses.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the hybrid demonstration. And after the break, we want to move on with two new recordings for La Scoscesa farm, and this time we will deal with agroforestry. So we are now going to show you the second and the third part of our hybrid demonstration with reference to the field part. Thank you.
So the agroforestry system we have developed here on this farm is related to the trees that were growing traditionally on this farm, which are olive trees, the olive tree you see behind my back. And we are trying to create an agroforestry system where we are adding other trees. We have added almond trees, cherries, plums, and even trees that function as sustenance to create shade for the vegetables we grow under the trees. So what you see here is the olive trees, and under we have vegetable beds. These are perennial beds where we grow annual vegetables. And the system is designed so that the trees create shade for the annual vegetables in summer. And they even create a microclimate that creates interesting conditions in autumn. Obviously in winter it's more difficult to grow open in the field, but we can manage to grow food 11 months a year in the open field, because the context that we have here with the terraces, or in this place, this space that is the only flat piece of land we have on the farm, we have started to integrate. So what is typical of an agroforestry system is that we are working with polycultures, which means we are growing food in a small space, stacking the layers of food that we are growing. So we have trees, we have shrubs, and then we have herbaceous plants like the vegetables that we have in these beds. And it is interesting because the more we can create diversified, multifunctional systems in which we grow more food in less space, the more a farm can grow per square meter food. Because the space you use it thinking about the height. So you have the trees on top, and then you go down with the layers until you get to the ground. And it is a very interesting condition that we can design in farms. Obviously here we are on a space that is flat. If we were on a terrace, we would have only maybe 2 or 3 beds on the width of the terrace that grow along the length, and on the side of the wall we would have the trees. And so we can mix trees, fruit trees, trees that regenerate the soil, that maybe are nitrogen fixers. And this is interesting because it creates the condition to work on the regeneration of soil as well as growing food. So we are stacking functions. And this is the interesting about agroforestry systems, that we stack the functions. So the moment we're growing a tree that is a perennial, we're growing a shrub, it can regenerate in the same moment we're growing it to maybe have a produce, have a harvest. We can even regenerate soil. And this is interesting because in this way, we don't disturb the soil as much as we would do in a conventional agricultural system where we have to till the soil every time we have to go and grow something. But we're trying to create a system here that is more resilient, that creates major fertility in the soil with the fact that we try to reduce the movement, the tillage of the soil. You can see in the middle of the beds, we have the pathways where I'm standing, where we have grass. This is perennial grass. We just cut it. Sometimes when it becomes too lush, it grows too much. Because in this way, we are keeping even the pathway part of the system, and it is always covered with herbaceous plants that are on the pathway, that in this way create the fact that no soil, even on the pathways, is under the sun, under the heat of the sun in summer, and is under the cold weather in winter. So the temperature of the soil is maintained averagely at the same temperature. There are not big changes in the season. And the beds we are working on are beds that are built and designed under the trees. So the space we have for growing annuals depends on the distance we have between the trees. So the plots we are growing vegetables changes from plot to plot, from space to space that we have. So when we have terraces, we can have maybe beds that are long 30 meters, or beds like in this situation where we have a bed that is long 10 meters, and we have more beds because there are less trees here. What we are doing is we are observing the temperature in summer when it's very hot. So we are starting to put more trees to grow more shade, because what we are seeing with climate change is that the sun, the heat we have in summer is very high, it's very hot, and annual plants are very fragile. They're very delicate, really. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to have more shade, growing more trees. This is the good side, the upside of having an agroforestry system, because it creates conditions in which we can have even the fact that we, as I said before, we have a microclimate, and we create the shade that maintains the plants cool and reduces evapotranspiration in summer, when with the high temperatures, water would just evaporate from the soil and from the trees. In this way, we are creating a system that is sustainable, it is more resilient, and it resists to drought, it resists to the high temperature conditions we get in summer, and it even creates a system that resists in the winter with low temperature when it's very cold. Okay, so in this system, we are looking at a system which we have an agroforestry system where we actually started with the trees from seed, or we transplanted the trees that are still quite small, they're just 2 years old. And what we have here is an example of an agroforestry system with trees, shrubs, we have gooseberries under, and then we have herbaceous and wild edibles, like this mallow plant here, which is Malva molivehensis, and it is an edible plant that is an annual, and it will reseed in this bed. This is a permanent bed where we have perennials. We're growing fruit, berries, and we're growing other plants, even on the ground, that are plants that enhance the fertility of the soil. The interesting part of this bed is that we have an example where, to maintain the fertility of the soil, we are working with mulch. Mulch is a system of covering the soil, so it keeps the soil covered in cold winter temperature or in high temperature in summer. Now, mulch is something that we have to think about as a solution that is based on the material, the resources we can find locally. So here we have this shrub. This is a gooseberry. So we are growing gooseberries here. This is an annual edible. This is a mallow plant. We can eat the leaves, we can eat the flowers. Then we have plants that grow that enhance the fertility of the soil. This is comfrey. Wild spinach. This is wild spinach. And all these plants, the characteristic they have is that they reseed themselves. So they will continue to reproduce themselves in this context. And above the berries, we have trees, we have fruit trees that we are growing. We'll see then we have an apricot tree. But the important thing is in this bed is we are working a lot with mulch. So we have grass clippings, we have olive leaves, and under we have the straw from our wheat that we grow on farm, or the straw from the chickpeas or the lentil plants. And under we have sheep's wool that will decompose. This is sheep's wool. It is here for a few months and it will decompose. And this keeps the soil moist and creates a condition in the soil where we have more humidity. And we have microorganisms, microfauna, we have fungi, bacteria that live in the soil because the temperature of the soil is perfect for the growth of these microorganisms and all this life in the soil. And we know that microorganisms, fungi and bacteria are symbiotic with the roots of the plants. So the gooseberry here will grow and the roots will be in symbiosis with the microorganisms we have in the soil, because they are covered by the mulch. The mulch is important because it keeps the soil covered, so we have less evapotranspiration of humidity, of water in the soil during summer, and the temperature in winter is kept warmer because the soil is covered, constantly covered by this mulch, which in time will decompose and will add organic matter and fertility to the soil, always for the microorganisms and for the roots of the plants. And we use olive leaves. Olive leaves, this is a region where we do olive oil. So we have a lot of olive leaves when we harvest the olives. And so we use this as a mulch. We have adapted even the fact of using under the wood chips, under the grass clippings, and under the olive leaves, which are 3 resources we can source locally. We have even added another resource that we find locally, that is sheep's wool. Sheep's wool is interesting because it will decompose in time under the wood chips, under the grass clippings, or under the straw, or under the olive leaves, and it will grow the fertility of the soil. So you see that mulch functions in different ways. It is a way that keeps the temperature cool in summer of the soil. And this is very important when we think about the soil temperature, because if the soil is cool, the water infiltrates easily. And so the roots of the plants will have the correct amount of humidity in the soil. And we reduce the evapotranspiration in summer. But on the same thing, in cold winter season, the mulch will keep the temperature of the soil sort of warm, so it won't freeze. And so the roots of the plants will not have problems that are related to freezing or low cold temperatures. One thing that I want to explain that is very important is that we have to think about mulch as something that we can use trying to gain access to resources we have locally. So we don't have to go and search for material that we don't have locally, but we can use everything. That's why we use the wood chips from the pruning of the fruit trees and the olive trees that we have on farm. That's why we use the straw from our wheat. That's why we use the straw from our chickpeas and lentils. It's all material that we can source locally. So it doesn't have costs. It reduces the cost for the farm. And there's no transportation for this material. It's all sourced in a radius of 10, 15 kilometers from the farm. And it's very important to search for the resources we can find locally. And mulch is one of the easiest ways to maintain temperature of the soil in a sort of average medium temperature, which doesn't vary too much from summer to winter. And it can maintain the humidity for the roots. And this enhances the populations of microorganisms, of microfauna, of fungi, of bacteria that we find in the soil. And we know that bacteria, microorganisms, and fungi are symbiotic with the roots of the plants. And this is mostly interesting when we work with perennial plants.
Okay, everyone, thanks a lot for your attention. So we are coming back here from the School of Agriculture of the University of Florence. We will now have the last technical part of the session, and then last, basically, shot from the field. We are going to talk now about one very important element of the Scoscesa farm, but more in general of water harvesting, which are infiltration. So I believe you have already seen in the first.
Yes, your presentation it's okay, but please talk loud. You are a little bit down with the volume, please.
Thank you very much. And I ask the technical support to write down eventually in the chat the next communication. And yes, here we have very specific type of water harvesting type, which are infiltration ponds for managed aquifer recharge. So we discuss water harvesting as a very important method for managing runoff. But this does not limit only to surface water, because sometimes, and we have seen this, we can store the water collected with water harvesting within the soil. And if we deal with the soil, at a certain point we will deal with groundwater. So this concept is strictly related to what we call water buffer. And if we have a landscape, we can manage this water buffer that is basically defined like all natural and artificial water storage which are present in the landscape. Shallow and deep aquifers, green water, meaning soil moisture, and blue water surface reservoirs, ponds and tanks. This can be seen as three different parts of the water in the landscape, but as you may understand, they are also connected. So blue water is connected to the green water, the soil moisture in the unsaturated part of the soil, which is in turn connected to shallow and deep aquifer. When you have rain, when you have runoff that you can collect, of course you can collect it in blue water surface reservoirs. But if these reservoirs are put in places where you have a good soil, you can infiltrate water in the soil. This water can be available as green water, but if you do it purposely and you infiltrate a lot of water, you can even reach the level in which you have actual groundwater recharge. And you can take all these hydrological mechanisms into account when you plant.
Please ask the speaker to be closer to the micro. We cannot hear anything properly. Thank you.
You can basically adopt a particular kind of approach to deal with the management of the water buffer, which is basically called the 3R approach. The 3R approach stands for recharge, retention, and reuse, and is an approach that can be applied to watershed management at the basin scale. What does it mean? That you do not only have your own recharge area in your own field, but if there is a river basin authority or some kind of authority managing the watershed, you can basically act in three directions. Recharge the water buffer, and in particular recharge the groundwater. Retain water, so just to create barriers in the landscape, like small dams, water harvesting, to keep the water in surface or close to the surface. Again, sand dams is a brilliant example. And then you can also think about reusing water. That does not only involve basically wastewater reclamation, but if you think about using drainage water from one field to irrigate another field, it's another example of very simple water use. So the key point is that if you apply the 3R approach, the watershed scale, especially in arid area, you can make a better use of the rainfall that is falling in a catchment. The basic idea is that you cannot only solve the water crisis or like a situation of drought with the operation of allocating water in a better way. Okay, you cannot solve the water problems of an area saying I'm giving this much water to the farmers, this much water to the landscape, this much water to the livestock. But you can also implement some measures that can allow you to have extra water. We have basically four important reasons in which we can decline our support for the 3R approach. Climate change adaptation by using natural storage, the possibility of water quality improvement, because if water is basically infiltrating to the groundwater, you do know that there is an effect of the soil that acts as a filter to improve the quality of water. So as a matter of fact, if you have a water harvesting system that is an open water, the water quality will be lower than the water that you take from the groundwater. Then you can have this effect that is called recirculation in the water chain. So again, with reuse, retention, and recharge, you can still manage your own water within the same system. And another very important factor that is in support of the 3R approach is the support function for the ecosystem and agriculture. So again, if you do groundwater recharge, that means that you are not only keeping water for your farm, but you are putting extra water in the environment. And this is very important in drought area because you can have additional water not only for your own activity, but also for a wide series of ecosystem services that can support agriculture, like the microorganism of the soil, but also to some extent other vegetation that can be basically an habitat for some even insect species that can help the pollination of your farm. So with the 3R approach, you deal with supporting multiple ecosystem services. Let me just focus on the first one, which is basically probably the most important to the extent of this lesson. So, of course, we have a problem of climate change. You do know that now there is also the conference of parties in Sharm el-Sheikh. What we will see more and more is that it will become key to bridge temporal gaps in water availability. So what will happen is that you will have more and more drought, even flash drought, maybe in the middle of the growing season, the middle of the rainy season, you will have like days with a lot of high temperatures and low rainfall amounts. So it's crucial, it will be crucial for every farming system to have a safe storage of water. If you use not only the artificial storage, but also the natural storage through groundwater recharge, you will have more water for your farm or even for your socio-ecological system. And in this sense, using groundwater and therefore improving groundwater through water harvesting has a long list of additional benefit. So first of all, groundwater is available, or almost always available, quite near to the point of desired use. You do not have like a river at the bottom of the valley. If you have a good groundwater, you just dig a well, and if the groundwater table is high, you do not need excessive energy to pump this water. Especially in the countries where we are working with this project, you can use hand or solar pumps to provide a reliable water supply. What does it mean? It means that in the period in which you need more energy for pumping water, you would also have more energy for the sun. So it's a good trade-off. And also, under a social point of view, women, but all the marginalized sectors of the livelihoods of societies, they can have additional time, because in many cases, fetching water is quite a time-consuming activity, especially in marginal contexts. So, of course, you should use natural storage in all the range of natural storages. I mean, it can be natural depressions, the soil of groundwater. Having extra groundwater as also additional benefit. It's very important in this sense, the recharge. And it's very important to understand that, of course, you have natural recharge, the interception of the vegetation, but you can also have increased infiltration by man-made intervention. In this case, we talk about managed aquifer recharge, but also you can have even other factors. So inefficient irrigation in a watershed approach is not very inefficient, because if you lose water in an irrigation system, then there will be some downstream area that will benefit from this water. Water harvesting ponds are a very important technique for infiltration and recharge. They allow you to collect water and to infiltrate water in areas where water will not stop alone. So why you do water harvesting? Because you have an area and you dig a pond for water harvesting to stop the water there and to infiltrate water there. They can work both in arid climates, but also in humid climates, of course, with some differences. So they are a very important technology for this kind of approach, for fostering the 3R approach, for fostering managed aquifer recharge. We are now going to see final live demonstration from the field to show you actual and real ponds from La Scoscesa. And this way, I hope you can understand that this farm has like a very, very integrated system for land and water management with agroforestry, terraces, but also groundwater recharge through water harvesting. And I hope you enjoy the next step. I encourage everyone, please keep your microphone muted and also post your question in the chat. And if you are interested, we'll probably share these slides in the next days, but also check this website that has a lot of extra information about the 3R approach that is like connected to water harvesting. But if you are interested in more information, please check this reference. And thank you very much. And now I leave the floor to the fourth video of today about infiltration.
So on a farm in an agroforestry system, water harvesting systems are fundamental. They're very important because we have to deal with rainwater for different reasons. First reason is to eliminate and let's say deal with soil erosion. So when we have a lot of water that comes on a piece of land where we are growing food, if we have water that goes all in one section of the land, we can have erosion. So water harvesting systems can help slow down water, distribute the water on the land, and most important, infiltrate water. Why are we interested in infiltrating water? Because infiltrating rainwater is important because it helps us lift the water table, so the groundwater will be more available higher up for the roots of the trees, of the plants, of the shrubs, of all the plants that we grow on a farm. So in an agroforestry system, we can have different, let's say, solutions to harvest rainwater. And we saw before we have terraces, which can be one solution. In this case, we want to speak about water retaining ponds. These are infiltration ponds, where we harvest the rainwater and take it into a pond, where then the water will infiltrate slowly in the soil, and it will create a wetland system for small animals, for birds, for reptiles, for amphibians, and it will infiltrate water into the soil, which will lift up the water table. We can have diversion channels, channels that take water towards the infiltration basins or ponds, we can call them in the same way. And these systems create the conditions that maintain a good humidity in the soil. So we are working in different ways. Obviously, apart from creating a system that deals with erosion, as I said, we create a system that deals with infiltrating water in the soil, lifting up the water table, and creating a wetland sort of situation. Water harvesting systems work with rainwater. We are speaking about rainwater, and they have to be dimensioned so they can deal with the quantity, the amount of rainwater that comes in the section of the land where we put the rainwater harvesting system. And rainwater harvesting systems can be and have to be actually designed to be one related to the other. So in this context, we are in a basin, an infiltration pond that we have on farm. The pond has a dam which is at my shoulders, which holds the water in this pond. The dam was built using the soil that we excavated from the pond, and the pond has an overflow. The overflow gives us the height of the water that we can hold in this pond. And in this way, we can regulate the amount of water we can hold in this pond. And the overflow functions as a system that regulates the quantity of water we have in the pond, but mostly it moves water to another system, another pond. And so we create an interlinked system of different water retaining solutions that are different ponds at different heights on the land where we are now, that create a system that we can distribute the water, always limiting erosion, along the land we are growing food on. So here we have this pond. It's just a case, a pure case that the pond is actually lined with stone. This is bedrock. So there's no lining that holds the water, but the water is collected here and is infiltrated here. So behind the dam of this pond, the water has infiltrated, so the whole section of the land below the dam will be saturated with water. The water table will go higher up, will be lifted in time, and usually in 5 to 7 years you can see the difference in how much the water, the fact that you have infiltrated it in the soil, has a permanent effect on the fertility of the soil that we have in this context. We are here in this context, here in this pond, at the 3rd year. We are starting the 4th autumn and winter. Autumn and winter are our rainy seasons. So at the end of the winter, we'll have infiltrated water here, and the woodland you see behind my shoulders will have
the benefits of all the water we have infiltrated in the winter. And we can see that in 3, 4, 5 years from now, the woodland behind my back will be more resilient when we have a drought in the summer, when we have high temperatures in the summer, and when we get long periods of seasons without rain. So we are trying to infiltrate the water to create this system where we get a major capacity of the trees to resist to the stress that we get in long drought periods that we have in summer here. Ponds have to be designed and built and dug out, keeping count of the space we have. This is the biggest pond we have on farm. It's 48,000 liters. We have ponds that are even smaller because they are related to the context. We can not only have ponds, we can even have just simple systems as channels, as I said before, or we can have even just systems that with a small dam made of rocks, put in a line, they control the flow of the water, they distribute it along their length, and they help water to slow down. Because what we have to do on a farm is slow water down, slow the fact that water flows very fast on a hillside like this context is, and so it can create erosion. This is what we're trying to do. And as I've said before, we are trying to work in stacking functions. Every single solution we adopt in this agroforestry system does not only perform one function, but it performs 2, 3, 4, 5 functions, and they are stacked all together. So we start to think about even the water harvesting systems as solutions that take us to think about the farm, about the agroforestry system, as a system that is interlinked, that functions all together. So the trees, the mulch, the permanent beds we have seen before, the terraces, these water harvesting ponds, they all function together, they are all interlinked. They create this situation where every solution we adopt on a farm in an agroforestry system is aimed to keep every resource, energy we get on the farm in a condition that is functional for the farm, functional for growing food, for the growth of the plants, for the fertility of the soil, and especially for the farmers, for the fact of giving farmers the possibility to work in a sustainable but even economic, resourceful condition. This is very important. So, water harvesting systems are the basis, the foundational basis, because if we can lift the water table, we can get more water into the soil. This is why we haven't lined these ponds, because these ponds are designed to infiltrate water, not to hold it. We don't use them to irrigate, because the best place to hold rainwater is in the soil. This is why we aim to create these solutions, to create these water harvesting systems.
Thank you, and welcome back. Hope the presentation was interesting, and we are now moving question and answer session. So I ask all the participants to write down their question in the chat and we will check it. We have also some students of the University of Florence with us. And for the students of the University of Florence that are here in person, they can just come here and do their question in person if they have. So we had a first question by Mr. Kimani online. I know that also Lorenzo is connected. And the question is, what or other material can we use to build terraces apart from stones? This system of farming is critical, especially where I come from, which is Kenya, where we have mudslides in the hilly places. So I don't know if Lorenzo, do you want to answer? And then maybe we can integrate from the room.
Thank you. Yes, well, obviously, if we don't have stone, we can't build terraces with dry stone walls. One solution is to have what we call bench terraces. They are smaller, the height is lower, and the side that is vertical is on a slope, and usually we have herbaceous plants that grow on the side, so they keep the soil in place with their roots. So we have perennial herbs, shrubs that grow, that function ecologically in a way that their roots hold the soil in place. So it is using a living resource, the plants, to hold the soil in place and form the terrace. Obviously, if one has the risk of having mudslides, at the top of the terrace system, in the catchment area that Dr. Castelli was speaking before, we could probably have some channels that direct the water, the excess water, away from the terraces that we have formed, to not have the risk of having mudslides. There has to be a design that looks at the catchment area and looks at the catchment area, how much water can actually fall on the area we are growing trees on, plants on, and understand the runoff, how much water will actually flow on the surface of the soil. But I would say the solution would be to use living plants and to use bench terraces, which are a bit lower in height. If we think about the dry stone walls, they're higher, and they are the best solution, and they work with living plants that with the roots hold the soil in place.
Thank you, Lorenzo. I don't know if you have any other comment to this. Just let me mention one thing that is related to this mudsliding problem. So it's never easy to build like terraces, dry stone wall terraces or bench terraces if the soil is unstable, because anyways you have to move soil. So one solution, and it was out of the scope of today, but we can keep in touch, is to use a technology that is called progressive terracing. It means not to move the soil, but just to create barriers. Can be even with big stones, can be with like stone booms or trenches, and then wait. So in the time of 10 years, the erosion will level the land between two booms, and you will have more or less the same effect, but with a lower risk. And specifically in Kenya, there is a traditional technique for doing progressive terracing that is called Fanya Ju. And this stands with digging trenches and literally throw the sand and the excavated soil upstream the trenches. And then you wait for the terrace to be created. So this is an additional technology. We have another question from the audience that is basically, I think, for the experience of Lorenzo again. So how large is the area around an infiltration pond that benefits from the infiltrated water?
It is the downside under the dam, under the pond. The area enlarges in time. The first year, we will have maybe just a few meters. In the following years, the fact that we keep on infiltrating water, that we are recharging the water table, the area will become larger and we will have the benefit on a larger area. I always think about Zephaniah Firi Mazeko from Malawi. He was a water harvesting inspiration for many of us that work with water harvesting. And he had the effect in the subsequent years, to enlarge the area that was that benefited from the infiltration of water. I can write the name of the person in the chat maybe, so if you want to search for him, I think it's very interesting.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lorenzo. I don't know if we have any question from the audience here. Well, feel free, I mean, you can just came here, or from the chat. And yeah, I have one personal question that maybe can be firstly directed here to the hall, and also, I mean, we have Mr. Summer. Okay, you have a question. So please, if you want to, please, if you have, please come here and introduce yourself.
My name is Matteo. I'm a master's student here at the University of Florence. I'm just curious about how long does the sheep wool in the mulching lasts?
It lasts from 6 months to 1 year, then it degrades. Usually it's 6 months.
So Lorenzo, I will see you more, but maybe for the benefit of all, I would just elaborate on the case. Thanks a lot. And maybe having some questions. My first question, you have 18 ponds, if I recall from the presentation, or I don't remember how many, but are they function in a cascading manner or not necessarily? That is something, do they compose an entire system? Or not?
Some of them do, because they are all in the same area, one under the other. So the overflow goes into the pond that is under. And of the 16 ponds, 7 are interlinked, one after the other. 3 on another area of the land are even interlinked. And other 3 and the others are, they're different sort of subsystems of the whole system we have. But the maximum we have of interlink is 7 under each other, yes.
As subsystem, that's great. And also more about the ponds themselves. I have seen rock beds, no? Have they been, let's say, constructed by yourself? As beds, or they're naturally? I didn't understand the beds of the ponds.
The pond that we filmed actually has it was dug out, and we found that under there was bedrock, so we didn't build it. That's actually bedrock. It's a vein of rock that we didn't touch. And the other ponds are dug in the soil, so the water infiltrates naturally in the soil. But being under oak trees, the leaves fall in the ponds and they degrade. And in time, they will make the bottom of the pond hold water longer because of this effect of degrading of the organic matter. So it will create a sort of impermeable film.
It's also for the benefit of all, including our audience. My last part, actually. What about, are you draining the terraces? Do you have gutters to drain the terraces, or not necessarily in your case? I've seen drip irrigation mostly implemented for crops apart from tree. Do you drain the terraces or not necessarily?
We don't drain the terraces, even because this year we have had very little rain. So every little drop of rain we try to infiltrate on the terraces. We use drip irrigation for the vegetables. So we actually recharge the water table, but we have a well for irrigation, and we keep the balance of water. We are monitoring the balance, how much water we take from the well and how much water we manage to infiltrate. And as of today, we are in a balanced system. So we have infiltrated 4.5 million liters, and we have extracted from our groundwater well 4.6 million liters since 2018. So we are monitoring the fact of trying to extract the amount of water that we are capable of infiltrating to try to keep the balance in the ecosystem.
Thanks so much, Lawrence. Actually, it's this comprehensivity of the program, what is very much interesting in all means that really appreciated to see the case. Thanks from our side. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lorenzo. I have one question, and it's related on which kind of parameter you are monitoring. I understood for sure piezometer, you have piezometer, but which other parameters you are monitoring?
Okay, so we have a water meter on the well for the regional regulation. So we have we see how much water we extract. And for the ponds, we actually have a pluviometer, so we know how much water has rained on our land where we infiltrate the water. And we do an empiric sort of collection of data, so we don't have technological data. It's more based on the fact we know how much water how much capacity we have in the ponds. So we monitor how much it's rained, how much water fills the ponds. We measure that, and we just sum it up every rain event we have. So yeah, we are doing more of a sort of empirical field collection of data.
Thank you. There is another question from the audience.
Hi, my name is Enrico. I'm a PhD student at the University of Florence. Based on which criteria you plan spatially all the features in the farm? For instance, the number of ponds and where these are located. How do you plan this? Thank you.
We design the ponds, their extension, how big they are in relation to the catchment area, obviously, and to the space we have. As I said before, some ponds are very small because maybe we have a high ground bedrock. So we have a 500-liter pond, which is very small. And we design them based on the catchment area and on the fact that we started actually designing these water harvesting systems to stop erosion, which was our main problem. And we still have the problem in other parts of the farm. So we start from trying to, first of all, take away water away from where it causes erosion. That's our first thing, to try to stop erosion. And from there, we start building the ponds and understand what function then from there they can perform in the farm, trying to always to interlink every function of one element to the whole system.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this complete explanation, Lorenzo. And we have still like 5 minutes, so I don't know if we have any other question. In the chat there is nothing, so for the moment, please feel free to write. Otherwise, I might have one question also for Professor Brescia and Dr. Salman, which is relevant, I think, for every. So we have seen a very brilliant example of application of water harvesting and agroforestry in one place that is arid, because the region where Lorenzo lives is an arid area if you think about Italy. My question is how we can upscale his experience to support farmers that maybe they don't have the skills, the training, and eventually the means to do what he's doing. So how, like through maybe FAO, authorities, even university, we can take his experience and outscale this approach.
Question. And from my side, since I am a teacher at the university, I think that one way for trying to spread this very good experience that Lorenzo has having since the time he started is education. So we need really to try to disseminate the experience and try to show to other farmers the advantages that Lorenzo is having in with these water harvesting interventions that he proposed. And also the important thing is that it's not only one, but it's the series of different interventions that are making really the experience successful. So we really need to convince farmers that now we are experiences, and 2022 really is the witness of this lack of precipitation. Then we have some instruments that we can put in action for not fighting, but dealing with the shortage of water in the next future, but it's already here. Thank you.
Thanks very much. In fact, from FAO side, what is interesting here? Well, first, FAO takes approaches into, let's say, more application in fields and in countries through its own projects. And it's commonly, let me say it, why this case is unique for us is commonly seen that the West to bring to developing countries is techniques, modern technologies, high tech, etc. But there is a big matching here between context in developing countries. So that is unique. So the learning from this, that this case can be taken into developing country easily because of all Lorenzo said, how simple can be and made by men or by farmers themselves in a simple way, in a nice integrated approach, and with a low cost basically. So and this is why it is unique and can be seen part of applications of projects of FAO in developing countries easily. And I think this is what we think to take it forward from that point, as well as demonstration. So also our job, we don't do research, but we demonstrate best practices. So this is one of the best practices that can be demonstrated in this domain of water harvesting, which is the job of FAO in the end.
Thank you really very much. And Lorenzo, do you want to have like a closure on this? And then I think we are in perfect timing. Lorenzo, you are muted actually.
Yeah, sorry, I muted because I was coughing. I want to thank you all very much, really, FAO and the University of Florence. I'm very glad. And what Dr. Salman said, yes, actually in his last, what he said now, answering the question that Dr. Castelli made is interesting because I have actually studied water harvesting systems from Africa and India in these years and have taken them here, looking at the traditional and historical solutions that we used to use here. But today we haven't used anymore because we are used to, technological solutions in Western agriculture. Instead, I really believe the importance of looking at tradition and learning from countries, developing countries that still have those traditions that are used every day by farmers. And as I said before, I wrote in the comments, Zephaniah Fili Mazeko, he's an example of water harvesting systems, and others in Rajasthan in India. I mean, I've studied these solutions and I think we will have to apply them here, you know? So I really thank you a lot for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thanks to you, Lorenzo, and thank you to all the participants. So just as final information for the participant following this discussion, I posted on the chat two references. One is the Agriwater Erasmus project, which is one project we developed in the last 2 years. That is a collection of best practices. They are actually from Europe, but they can be of your interest. And the second collection of practices, which is held by the WOCAT database from the University of Bern, is in the chat. So I think these two can be some references that you can actually use and interrogate if you want to learn from other best practices. And also, I mean, maybe Lorenzo, we can share your contacts with the participant later if someone is interested.
Of course.
Yeah, so thanks a lot. And I think we can close the hybrid demonstration. Oh, there is a final question, but I think we should close here. I'm sorry, Hurri, but maybe you can email us. And again, thanks to everyone for your attention. And if you want to see this lesson again, it will be soon posted on our YouTube of the Water Harvesting Lab and share with our social media. And again, on behalf of the Water Harvesting Lab and the University of Florence, I'm very thankful to Lorenzo for his collaboration and also to FAO for choosing us for this model. Thanks again.